making money makes sense. You're listening to The Larry Kudlow Show.
Coming to you live from the Small Business Authority studios. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Larry Kudlow. Join us during the week, CNBC Kudlow Report, 7, 8 p.m. Eastern. With great pleasure, I welcome an old friend to the show, California Congressman David Dreier, longtime chairman of the House Rules Committee, longtime supply-sider, and longtime friend. David Dreier, welcome.
Is this former Reagan administration budget guru Larry Kudlow?
This is he.
Hey, let me tell you, Larry, first of all, thanks for having me back, and it's always a great thrill to be with you. And I've got to say I'm particularly excited that for the first time in my adult life, I'm going to be joining you in the private sector as I've decided not to run for re-election. After 32 years, and first meeting you 32 years ago,
Yep.
when we were talking about the Reagan economic package when you were at the Office of Management and Budget. But I'll tell you what I did the other day that you and your audience might, as we look at this election and where we're going economically and all. What's the GDP growth rate right now, Larry?
It's about 2.5%.
About 2.5%. Okay. We are now, obviously, 3.5 years into the Obama Economic Recovery Program, right? And let's remember where we were when you and I first went into public service in the early you were there before, but in the early 1980s, when I went into Congress in 1981, we had an unemployment rate that was well into double digits. We had inflation that was sky high. Interest rates, you remember, were 16, 17%. And we put into place the Economic Recovery Tax Act, which we passed in the summer of 1981. And at this point, in 1984, we had an 8.5% GDP growth rate. And so that's why I think it's important to juxtapose the proposed solution to a down economy that you and I worked on in the early 1980s and the success rate that had, bold, strong 8.5% GDP growth rate versus what you just characterized correctly as a 2.5% GDP growth rate. And that's why what we're working on now is so darned important when it comes to looking at this challenge.
Well, let me ask you, the topic du jour, with votes expected in the Senate, I don't know about the House, you can tell me, is the Buffett rule to raise the minimum tax. If you make over $1 million, you got to pay a 30% tax. It's essentially an increase, David, in the capital gains tax from 15 to 30%. That's basically what it is. Now, let me ask you, some people say it doesn't matter, this is small potatoes, why are we worrying about this? But other people say this is another double tax on capital, this is another penalty for successful investing, and I want to ask you your opinion about the tax and what's going to happen to it in the House.
Well, first of all, nothing's going to happen to it in the House. I mean, this is being done by the Democrats as it's a political device to encourage their, and I know people say that when you use the term class warfare, it's being very straight and harsh, but I mean it is. It's the us versus them class warfare argument. And you and I know very well, and the people in your audience understand very well, that the notion of encouraging job creation and economic growth is what we've got to do. I mean, while we have some positive indications of improvement in the business cycle, I argue it's being done in spite of, not because of the policies that have come out of Washington. And so, it's a non-starter. You know it, and I know it. And the fact is, we still have to deal with the inevitability, if we don't take action, of what's going to happen at the end of this year. And that's why, I'm concerned about the long term. In the short term, I'm actually kind of optimistic. I'm bullish. But I'm concerned about the long term because of the fact that, and this election will determine it, whether or not we're going to deal with the dramatic increase in marginal rates that we will face in January. So this measure is going no place. And I remember you became one of the advisors to my zero capital gains tax caucus. You remember that about a decade or so ago? Yeah. And I think that you called it correctly just now, double taxation. There's no reason for us to be taxing people again, as they're simply encouraging job creation and economic growth. I will say this, though, Larry, and this is a little counterintuitive, and that is, I have, you and I have lots of friends who are extraordinarily wealthy, and I have people who say that if we were actually able to get a handle on the entitlement spending, Medicare, Medicaid, those kinds of things. If we were really to turn the corner on that, they would be willing, if they had some degree of confidence about the future, to provide a little more in revenues, in taxes, not in revenues. Obviously, we want to encourage growth, but they don't have the kind of concern about some kind of increase. If they knew that there were confidence about the entitlement future, that meaning that we'd solve the problem.
What about the president's argument? He just made it again this morning in his radio address. He says, David Dreier, chairman of the House Rules Committee, David, he says, the Buffett rule will boost growth. It makes the code fairer. It'll raise revenues that will allow the government to invest in growth. That's his argument.
Yeah. We should do absolutely nothing, Larry, that increases taxes on anyone until we look at an overall comprehensive tax reform package, which, frankly, you and I worked on. You remember, I was a big supporter of Giuliani's back in 2008. I introduced his proposed flat tax measure then, and I'm going to be seeing him in New York next week talking about this kind of economic growth. We should not do anything to increase taxes until it's done in a comprehensive way. And that's why, and the president is just plain wrong. He's just plain wrong to make that claim.
Well, okay, fine. Just procedurally, will there be a vote in the House?
No, I mean, why? Listen, as you said, I've been privileged to serve as the chairman of the House Rules Committee. We're the traffic cop. You sat with me up in my office up there. You know what? Why should we? Why should we have a vote on it in the House? I mean, I have no plans to have a vote on the Buffett rule in the House. If it were something that I truly believed would generate economic growth and be beneficial for working men and women in this country, I'd consider it. But it's not, and so let the Senate have their vote. We have no plans for a vote in the House.
All right, let me ask you a follow-up. You were referring to this earlier, David Dreier. This tax Armageddon, which is coming in January of 2013, okay, it's really just a few months away. The entire tax code implodes, basically. The Bush-era tax cuts are reversed, repealed. You've got Obamacare tax cuts. You've got the payroll tax cut expires. I didn't really like the payroll tax cut, but whatever. Now, is there anything that's going to happen in the months ahead to deal with this tax Armageddon?
Yes. I mean, we have to take action. And again, I find it interesting. Democrats and Republicans alike, everybody, even the president talks about the need for overall comprehensive tax reform. And and to his credit, President Obama talks about reducing the top rate on job creators, corporations. And so, I mean, I think that that's something that we need to do ASAP. I can't tell you with certainty that something is going to happen because, I mean, that is the question. I mean, is the president going to go on board and do what he did very wisely in the December of last year, a year ago, when he agreed to extend those cuts, recognizing that it could jeopardize economic recovery if he didn't? I hope and pray that he does. But, I mean, there are no guarantees at all.
Would there be any movement to put a bill out that would just extend the Bush tax cuts?
Sure. I mean, I think that's basically what we did before, and I think that of course there will be. We will push that, and we can pass that through the House because there's recognition again of the fragility of the economy, that it's essential that we do just that.
And when would that come? I mean, that's an interesting point. In other words, let's say you ultimately want pro-growth tax reform of the sort you're talking about or Paul Ryan's talking about or whatever.
Right. Sure.
Okay, fine.
We're all together on that.
Yes, you are. Now, the issue is buying time so the economy doesn't implode from this tax Armageddon. When might this extension vote, does it have to be in the lame duck, David, or can it be sometime this spring or summers?
I mean, I would like to think that we could do it before. And the reason is I mean, I would like to say that uncertainty is the enemy of prosperity. And for us to continue, again, that's why I say I'm not as bullish in the long term as I am on the short term because of the fact that we have this uncertainty that exists on the potential of this massive tax increase that could be imposed on job creators and working men and women in this country. So, I mean, I hope, working together that we could, in a bipartisan way, do it because, again, we've got to be able to get it through the Senate as well, and we got to get the president to sign it. And so this is something that we're going to have to again, to his credit, again, the president was supportive of the small business, job creation measure that we passed 3 weeks ago, which was a positive. And so maybe on this, he'll come around. Although, when he's making arguments like this buffer rule stuff, I mean, we can't do this so-called buffer rule thing again, until we look at this overall comprehensive issue and tackle entitlements. I'm
going to leave it there. David Dreier, House Republican leader, chairman of the Rules Committee. Thank you for joining us, everybody. I'm Larry Kudlow. We're going to come right back and talk to Peter Ferrara about the double and triple taxation of capital and why that's a lousy idea. Please stay with us.
The Larry Kudlow Show.